We are live. It's Europhile Live. Hi, Maddie.
Hi, Monique.
How's it going? All good today?
Oh, yes. Happy New
Yeah,
Year,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
everyone, and Merry
Yeah.
Christmas.
Yes, yes. Merry Christmas. And we're just about to step into 2026. So, right, we thought it would be a great idea to go through all of the events, let's say of 2025, just to refresh. It was a really busy year, a really, really busy year. And disheartening and many times, but we can just get right into it. We're going to be waiting for Dietmar Pichler, who is coming. Okay, and he'll also be joining us. He'll just be a few minutes late, but he can step in. Okay, at any time. What we're not going to do, right, Maddie, is there's certain things we're not going to touch. Okay, on this one.
Yeah.
It's Eurocentric and about what is going on, okay, here, mostly like American domestic politics. No. Okay, so we won't be touching on anything to do with Doge or MAGA or Trump and all of that kind of stuff. There are other people who are dealing with domestic American politics, and that's their expertise. The same thing with the Cambodian Thailand war, all right, which we're not experts in. I'm not, at least, so I can't really say anything about that. Venezuela, this thing, although I'm really happy if Maduro does get, let's say, kicked out, but let's just leave it at that. The same thing with the Israeli and Gaza ceasefire. Okay, we're not going to be talking about that, but there is a little something that Madi, you can help us out with, which is the Taliban incursions in Tajikistan, because there's not a lot of people that actually pay attention to that part of the world.
Yep.
Madi, can you give us just a little bit on that?
Sure. Quick rundown. It's we know that Taliban came into power in Afghanistan is just 2 weeks after the American withdrawal out of Afghanistan, and the Taliban started to go back to their old tricks, where they're trying to expand their foreign influence, which puts them at odds with other neighboring countries. For example, with Iran and Tajikistan. Not that many people know, but amongst the common public, I mean. But Taliban does not have a good relationship with Iran. And they never had. They also never had a good relationship with the government in Dushanbe, the capital of Tajikistan. Back in the 1990s, soon after the collapse of the Soviet Union, after Tajikistan became independent, Taliban tried to support the local Islamists and sending volunteers and even providing material support for the Tajikistani civil war. This resulted in an international coalition, which included Russia at the time, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, to intervene in Tajikistan on behalf of the secular government. So I'm not saying that the secular government are the good guys, but it's one of those situations where you have either a secular dictatorship or you have religious extremists who want to take over. So it's not a great choice either way.
Yeah, yes.
So it's nothing new. It'll probably be a low intensity, occasional conflict with border clashes and incursions. As of now, Taliban still wants to get some legitimacy abroad after their takeover.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been establishing diplomatic relationship with Moscow. But if they continue on this path in Tajikistan, it will put them at odds with Moscow. So we'll see how that plays out.
Okay.
Because Tajikistan is a major influence center for Russia in the region.
Mm-hmm.
They have a base there, not far away from Dushanbe, right in the suburbs, and officially is the only country that hosts a base for the GRU, Russian Military Intelligence.
Yeah, that's what I remember. We were doing our discussions in our weekly meetings, and that it was the only area, right, where there was a GRU base.
Yep.
Which puts it on the map, let's say, for other, right, geopolitical matters. Okay, so we are going to go through, all right, those are the ones that we're putting aside, okay, for now, but we're going to go through certain areas, big events. Okay, obviously, the first one that we're going to start off with is Russia's war, okay, against Ukraine. We know that e-stories, for example, is really, Ukraine centric. So we're looking at what is going on there. Um, Maddie, I'm just going to say a few things, then you can jump in with what thing. One of the things that we've forgotten, we pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the battlefield, where the Ukrainians are, okay, holding the line there. Um, we don't pay a lot of attention of what's happening in the occupied territories. There's less information coming out from there, no more and more. Atesh, there are the yellow ribbons, for example, have been continuing their actions against, okay, the actual occupying force, the Russian occupying force. But we're seeing in that area, especially a Russification process that is really, really picked up. So there's the militarization of the children in their schools, having to abandon Ukrainian, for example. A lot of them are actually doing homeschooling in Ukrainian. Okay, so this is a huge problem. We also had the story that broke maybe about a month ago of Ukrainian children who were taken to North Korean camps. Okay, for right again, militarization and Russification. Russians moving in Mariupol and other cities where they are occupying and just simply taking the property. Okay, so we've seen a lot of that. There were a lot of videos, I think, over the summer of real estate, right? Real estate agents who were showing off these apartments, still bombed out apartments. That's the whole point there. So that, yes, okay. Another thing too, and maybe Madi, you want to comment on this. In speaking to somebody else, they had pointed out to me that maybe the Ukrainian, because everybody was waiting for the Ukrainian offensive, right, over the summer. Maybe it was already because of the long range, right? We've seen all throughout the year,
Yep.
Ukrainians hitting long range targets. Do you want to talk about that for a sec?
Sure. Just as a side note, I think Dietmar is ready to join.
Oh,
But yeah, the Ukrainian bombing campaign took the Russians by surprise to some degree because they didn't expect the extent of economic damage that it will do to the Russian economy.
yep.
Striking Russian oil refineries with relatively cheap drones with low payloads has been quite effective because we've seen week over week over week the Russians going through a fuel shortage, and it resulted in record high prices for gasoline and diesel fuels in Russia, which resulted in them actually asking the countries like Belarus and China to supply the missing fuel. The crisis is still not resolved. The Ukrainians are continuing their strikes, not to the same extent as we saw a months earlier, uh, but every single oil refinery that is knocked out for the Russians, it takes them out in the base case scenario for at least 6 months before it can be repaired and relaunched again. In the worst case scenario, some of the condensation towers and some of the equipment that gets destroyed in those strikes cannot be replaced at all. So we'll see how this plays out and continues, but
Yep.
it's likely that Russia's refining capacity is damaged until the end of the war,
Oh, wow.
whenever that happens.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, because I read someplace that it could take anywhere from like up to a year or 2 years.
yeah.
Oh, Dietmar is here.
Hello, Deepak.
Hi, Dietmar.
Good to see
Everyone,
you.
welcome. How are you?
Hello, Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry
Christmas. Merry Christmas. I'm glad you were able to join us. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Fine, except that I missed the train, so I'm sorry for being a
Oh,
little bit late.
that's okay. That's okay. Actually, the Eurostar today was blocked. They couldn't. The Eurostar was basically grounded. I don't know what you would say, due to power loss of something or another. So trains.
Hybrid warfare, maybe. Hybrid warfare.
I don't know. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of. Okay. And we'll get into that because that's going to be Russia's campaign against Europe, which is the other, right? The other thing. Right now, Dietmar, we started off with some of the things that we will not get into, which are certain areas of the world that we're not experts in, including American foreign domestic policy, because that's not us. We're now talking about Russia's war against Ukraine. Okay, and
Yep.
this is, and basically that the battlefield, there is still a battlefield going on. The Ukrainians are holding the line. The Russians have only been able to take less than 1% of the territory. Uh, and the Ukrainians have also regained, certain areas. But we also took a look at what the long range strikes, which are considerable. Operation Spiderweb, which was
Yeah.
an incredible operation. Audacious. So we're hoping that they've got something else, in the works,
Yep.
in that sense there. I also talked a little bit about Dietmar, about the, let's say, what is happening in the occupied territories and about the Russification and militarization of those areas, and that kind of thing. Another thing too, guys, what I've noticed is that in certain cities, the battlefield has also moved towards long-range strikes by the Russians, onto Odessa, which before we didn't see a lot in the past years, but this year it's taking, in the port cities on different things, affecting, by the way, all of the transport, right, of wheat transports and different things. They've been hit especially hard in the past, few days, but this has been going on for quite a while. I follow the Italian ambassador that's there. So he puts out, exactly what is happening in Odessa. Maddie also touched on the oil, the effects of these strikes on, the production of oil, and that kind of thing. One thing I did want to ask you, Maddie, about the oil, can you just talk to us just a little bit about, let's say, what's happening with the Russian, economy? We're all
Sure.
waiting for it to collapse because every day we're seeing how the Russian government keeps, the Kremlin is taking measures day by day in order to find resources amongst the actual, commercial areas, but also amongst the people themselves, private citizens. You want to comment on that just a little?
Sure. So touching up on oil, which is still their major source of income, over the past year, we saw the price for the Russian brand of oil, Brent, crash from 50 something dollars all the way to at the minimum of $33 per barrel. $33 per barrel is roughly how much it costs them to take the oil out of the ground and ship it to the customer. So they're selling it at break-even point. But it doesn't mean that the Russians stopped making money from selling oil entirely, because they're still making roughly about $1 billion US a week.
Yeah.
Because they're also selling another brand of oil called Espo. That oil doesn't suffer such heavy discount as Brent. Most of the depreciation, or most of the discounts, were introduced in the beginning of the year, but especially heavily impacted the Russian oil after Trump's Trump sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil. The immediate impact was mostly driven by the political optics, and the U.S. administration's pressure on India. But we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, countries such as India don't really care about optics or ethics. As long as they're making money, they'll continue doing it. As long as it doesn't damage them financially in some other way, they'll continue doing it.
Yeah.
Some of the decreases on Russian revenues were also driven by the reduction in the trade with China. Not because the Chinese are trying to abide by Western sanctions, but simply because the Chinese already, for the most part, got what they wanted out of the Russians. And so they're also going through an economic crisis of their own. So some of the energy demands that they have are either not growing or not growing as fast as they used to.
Yeah.
We also have a global reduction in the oil price in general, because OPEC expanded production over the past year. And I know some might suspect that OPEC expanded production because maybe the Americans asked them to expand production, but my suspicion is that that's not the case. The primary reason why OPEC expanded production is to ensure that it's not profitable for American companies to expand production in the United States.
Yeah.
So,
They're keeping the price low, basically.
yeah,
So it will
sure.
affect the Americans as well.
Exactly. So it's great for American consumers, not so great for American oil companies.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if it's good for the consumers.
Yeah. Yeah. So you win some, you lose some. For the Russian economy overall, this year has been pivotal, and because sometime around summer of 2025, you probably noticed that we through Eurostack, Europhile, published a weekly review of the Russian economy, because those were very interesting months, because they over the first half of the year and during the summer, there was a significant pivot in the Russian narratives, domestic narratives surrounding their economy. They stopped saying that the Russian economy was doing well, and they openly started to express big concerns about the slowdown in the Russian economy, because the situation got so bad that Russian propaganda can no longer hide it.
Okay.
So 2026 is likely going to be an even worse year for the Russian economy. But I'd like to caution everyone, it doesn't mean that the Russians will run out of money for the war.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah. In one of our Substack articles, we actually analyzed the situation and came to the conclusion that the Russians will likely have sufficient funding, maybe up until the end of 2026 in the best case scenario, 2029, sorry, in the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, they will have enough funding until 2033.
Yeah.
So another kind of headline that was dominated with regards to the Russian economy is the severe budget deficit that they've been going through this year, and what was done about it over the past couple of months. So the Russians covered it using three primary sources, something we predicted in one of our articles. It's not rocket science. It was just obvious. It's not because we're super smart. The first in the pecking order theory for closing budget holes in the Russian deficit comes the National Wealth Fund of the Russian Federation. So just using the remaining foreign currencies, Russian rubles, yuans, and so on and so forth, to cover the hole. But even that was not enough. They had to resort to additional debt issuance by the government. So the Ministry of Finance launched multiple auctions in the amount exceeding 8 trillion rubles to close the budget hole on the secondary market. But given that nobody is going to buy the Russian debt, and by anyone, I mean anyone outside of Russia, the only clients or the only buyers of Russian government debt are Russian commercial banks. And they buy these kind of assets simply because they are under pressure from the Kremlin. If they want to, if they want to continue operating, they need to buy those. Of course, they don't have limitless capital either. So what do? They use repo agreements or repurchase agreements with the Russian central bank. Most recently, I think it's in excess of 3 trillion rubles. I forgot the exact number. It's under 4 trillion rubles. So half of the 8 trillion that was issued was secured by Russian commercial banks through repo agreements to buy Russian government debt. Okay. So essentially, the way the picture looks, when you think about it, it's actually the Russian central bank that's giving money or printing money for the Russian government. But legally, because in Russia they still try to follow some laws, legally, the Russian central bank is not allowed to give money directly to the government. So they use the commercial banks as intermediaries between the Russian central bank and the Ministry of Finance.
Okay. So basically, they've found this way of being able to funnel money that they're printing, right? Let's say in Moscow, or wherever the hell they print it, get it, to the other, into the commercial banks and redistribute them, right, to the other industries that are in need, basically.
And another source of income that the Russian government has been using to close the current budget hole was the sale of gold, of their gold reserves and the National Wealth Fund. So over the past few months, they sold gold mostly to China, and they sold it in the amount of $2.1 trillion US dollars.
That's a lot.
Sorry, not trillion, billion, not trillion.
Billion. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Trillion would have been like, okay, the Italian budget. All right.
Yeah.
Got it.
The Italian GDP. Yeah.
Okay. GDP, the whole thing.
Yeah.
The same with
Yeah.
Austria, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason I'm saying that the Russians, the prime reason why I'm saying that the Russians still have some, albeit illegal but creative ways to fund the war, is the amount of money that is actually still sitting in the Russian commercial banks, the deposits of regular citizens. It's 63.5 trillion rubles that is still sitting in Russian banks.
So they're going to try to find a way to get to that.
Yeah. So they are actually already getting to that money. It's just not directly. So you notice how I said 8 trillion out of 8 trillion, 4 trillion was funded by the Russian central bank. What do you think the other 4 trillion is coming from? It's coming from the commercial banks, but the commercial banks obviously are not using their own money. They're using the money of the depositors.
That they got got it.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why the Russian commercial banks have been pushed heavily over the past year not to issue too many mortgages, not to issue too many consumer. Yeah. So that they could actually use that capital to buy government debt.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I think there was a 30% drop in the amount of mortgages that were emitted, right? The action.
Of course, I'm simplifying a lot. So there are other drivers that are causing this reduction. Primarily the falling real incomes of an average Russian. Also, increasing default rates amongst the general population and businesses, because the economy is not doing great unless you're working in the military-industrial sector in Russia.
That's right.
And whenever you see a number for growth that is posted for Russia, keep in mind that the official inflation rate of 7% is hocus pocus. It's not real. No. The real inflation rates in Russia is in the double digits and most likely closer to 20%.
Yeah.
So
we're still hanging on. It doesn't seem to be making a dent. Okay. I mean, we're finding, and there are lots of government workers who are not being paid. We've had, a lot of stories from the eastern part, of the Russian Federation, the states in the east, where a lot of, the local governors are not able to pay. Hospitals, teachers, hospital workers, teachers, and a lot of other people that are part of the public sector. So, Madi, basically what you're saying is that we're just going to have to find other ways, right, to deter. They can still keep going.
They can still keep going. And as of now, the most effective way to impose sanctions on Russia is to provide long-range munitions to Ukraine, because kinetic sanctions have been so far the best sanctions.
I would agree. I think they are. There's just one more thing before we get into what this campaign is in wider Europe. And there's two things here. One is the importance, of the Armenian and Azerbaijan, ceasefire and the agreement that they signed, because it's in the South Caucasus. Madi, just very briefly on that, and then I'll just do a little overview of what's going on with China.
Sure. If you were at our prior live streams or read some of our prior articles, we discussed it in great detail. So here we'll just do a quick rundown. The South Caucasus region is very important because it's a land bridge connecting Europe to Central Asia that doesn't go through Russia and Iran. So if that corridor is secured, it provides strategic flexibility both for Central Asia as the states in the South Caucasus and Turkey, and especially some of the European states that do buy resources from Central Asia. For example, half of Italian oil is actually coming from Kazakhstan. So yeah,
I know, and he's got a lot of interest there.
Yep. Exactly. This conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan has been ongoing since the late 80s. Yes,
Yeah,
you heard it. You heard that right. It started while
there you
both
go.
were part of the Soviet Union,
Hmm.
and it continued up until, well, technically it's still ongoing because there's no official peace treaty, but the correct steps have been taken this year, where we could potentially now have a proper process towards peace.
Yeah,
uh, uh, the Armenians decided to withdraw from internationally recognized territories of Azerbaijan. And in return, Azerbaijan decided to provide a trading corridor and vice
yeah,
versa to Armenia.
yeah.
I think economically it's lucrative for both just to continue this process and work towards peace because both stand to gain a lot financially.
Yeah. And we've also talked, I think, before about the whole that whole corridor, no? What the Chinese call the middle corridor. So it's
Yep.
going all the way from, let's say, the Caspian Sea, right? All across um, Azerbaijan and Armenia and then into Georgia, okay,
Yep.
as well, which we haven't mentioned, okay, so far. But that whole area is fundamental on, let's say, for as a trade route, because that's a vital, okay, trade route there.
Yep.
And also because we're talking about the eastern flank, okay, of NATO,
Yep.
right onto the into the Black Sea. So it's an area that very few people pay attention to, but it's worth your while looking into that kind of thing. Anything else you wanted to say about that, Monty, before I get into China and I segue in?
No.
No.
Just as a side note, it's one of those hotly contested regions historically because that's
Yeah.
where three empires met: the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Persian Empire.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That whole well, it was one of the first areas developed in the world,
Yep.
right? Where where goods, no people,
Yep.
no transited, so on and so forth. Let me get into China for just a second because we've been watching over the past 2 days now the Justice Mission 2025, the PLA PLN's exercises, live fire exercises. These are the second ones, by the way. The first ones were done, and everybody remember this year around Australia, which was really, really scary. These are just as bad. I was talking to a contact who has family in Taiwan, and they're very worried. In fact, the Taiwanese forces were out trying to, they also did some actions on the seat in order to counter some of the things that were going on. So we're watching that kind of thing. But the one thing that we saw all through, it started this year, it will continue even more next year into 2026, is an increase in trade. China's expansion into the NSR. Okay, so those of you who, let's say, are not up on all these little acronyms, NSR is the Northern Sea Route, which goes from China across, okay, Russia up at the top. It goes along the coast, okay, of the, let's say, the northern tip of Russia, and then let's say those trade routes end up in Europe, okay, in the north part, right, of Europe. So that area, there was let's say a significant expansion of trade, okay, going on in that area, and also Chinese incursions there. We also had China beginning the construction of the largest dam in the world, which is in northern Tibet. And we also had, for example, the Chinese aircraft carrier, the first one, the Fujian class, and the drone mothership, okay, as well. So these are significant things that China has been doing. Madi, have you got anything to say about the Chinese, either the Fujian class or anything that I've mentioned before we move on?
Well, the Fujian is just training wheels for the PLAN, um, because it looks like they're now constructing their first nuclear powered aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
But I think it's more important to mention the dam because the largest dam
Yeah.
that they're constructing is actually a massive political tool that they will use against India and Bangladesh because the rivers that they're planning to block feed the entire ecosystem of East
Yeah.
India and the delta in Bangladesh. So uh, for Bangladesh, it's the livelihood of that country. So I would imagine the Chinese will use that as a major tool.
Yeah, yeah. And let's say coercion, and
Exactly.
also for to put pressure, okay,
Yep.
on anyone in the area. Okay, now we're going to get into, and Dietmar, I need you here. Okay. All of Russia's campaign against, the wider campaign that it's waging against Europe, okay, as well, and Ukraine being, okay, in Europe. We've already talked about specifically what's going on in Ukraine, but what I'm thinking of here, and then we'll get into a specific area, which you are, right, our resident experts, okay, along with myself, right, in information campaigns. But what we've seen is, let's say, an increase in all of the hybrid threats, all of the hybrid attacks. So gray zone warfare, which means these are attacks that are just below that level, that threshold level that we say, okay, this is war. And they're doing everything they can. They're pushing the limits, okay, to this kind of thing. All through the year, we've seen balloons, for example, fly into Lithuania from Belarus, cyber attacks against almost everything. Um, Dietmar, did you guys have cyber attacks in Austria that you were monitoring? Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Coming to the cyber attacks, what we need to understand is, and specifically about these attacks, when they have Russian origin, and the research from these reports that I saw, they go so far that they at least suspect that it's going to have that it has Russian origin. That these are some very regional places, so regional organizations, regional companies. Yeah, so something that
Mm,
if you live in Vienna, you don't even know about them. And that
yeah.
shows that they really target infrastructure, particularly where you don't expect it. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because if you target some place, I mean, if you want to kill a terrorist attack, you need a lot of people. You need Paris or Vienna. You need all this. But if you want to really confuse a population, really to
Yeah.
create certain anxiety that it can happen everywhere, but you don't need to kill people, then it makes a lot of sense to have a lot of these cyber attacks, small ones on the local level. And it's, of course, it makes no difference for them geographically. And I guess also that these organizations were less prepared. So, yes, there are a lot of
Hmm.
cases. Look up cyber attacks in Austria. You find a lot of examples that are not based in Vienna.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. And I might let me add that in Siena, in my university, we had a huge cyber attack that knocked us out for over 2 months. Okay. So people could not use their emails. They had to, there were a lot of things that they had to do. And what I found was that this is also a mechanism for, let's say, for the actual population themselves to begin blaming, instead of who actually did, right, who was the let's say the malignant actor that did this. We start blaming, for example, the university that was not putting the email up fast enough. So we're losing trust, right, in our institutions, okay, in order to be able to counter this kind of thing. I mean, there were lots of other pluses for whoever did it. We know that it was Russia actually that did that one. But I mean, University of Siena is a very, very small. I mean, I live in a very, very small village, really. Okay, with the second-rate university, it's not important. It's not like they hit the FAO in Rome, or in Milano they hit Eni's head office or anything like that. So I agree with you on that one. It was a great observation. There were other kind of attacks as well. We had sabotage attacks across, okay, in the UK, in Poland, in Belgium, for example, the cutting of undersea cables. And that's important for a communication, right, point of view. Do any of you want to comment on that?
No, I just would like to add about these attacks that are on the rural areas. Yeah, that it's
Mm-hmm.
some, like, if you are a big power, then you target the, let's say, the big urban areas, the big cities. But if you are a superpower, then you are everywhere. So I guess this is what they want to signal. So it's like with McDonald's. Yeah, on the beginning they were in the big cities, then they were even in the small cities, because they wanted to conquer the world. They went also to the small countries. And I guess this is a little bit also the mindset. And what we had in Austria is a very big, let's say there was uncovered a story about the chat protocol of two Russian spies. Yeah, both were not Russian citizens, and they discussed how they conduct false flag operations. So they sprayed or painted or put something on the walls, pro-Ukrainian messages, but of course not pro-Ukraine. The goal was to harm Ukraine with a kind of far-right symbolism. And this is something that the Soviets did already during the Cold War. I had the chance to read all these chats of these spies, so also things that were not published. And I can tell you the mindset of these people. Yeah. So let's say we are in a chat and we discuss, oh my God, what can we do to uncover the Russian trolls, and what can we do to give them a little bit kick in the ass? Yeah. Their mindset was like that. It was like activism. It was like private people. You expect something like a Soviet spy that listening to some orders and but they really thought it was so disturbing. They were not organized in a way. They were like brainstorming and trying to find ways to harm Ukraine and to help somehow to win this war. And what for me was very interesting, that these people, they believed in their cause. They did it not just for the money. You could read it between the lines. And if you compare this to the people who got hired for $200, $300 online, it's different, because they were the organizers. But also the people who got hired for the small jobs, in some cases, they got hired because they were already present posting pro-Putin, pro-Russian narratives. And then they were asked, would you like to do something more? Would you like to go on an adventure? Would you like to earn $300-400 or euros? And we need to understand it like that. It's not always A or B. It's somehow also in between. And we could get a lot of information how these networks work, how they operate, how they recruit people, and what is going on in their mind. And I would say the masterminds of these operations are really, it was disgusting to read how they think and how disturbing, really.
Yeah. Well, remember also when in Vienna, right, guys, when we were at, right, the conference for Moldova, and how, which I haven't mentioned yet, the subversion, right, how Russia had tried to subvert, all of the Moldovan election. And they went into a lot of detail, right, of how there was a whole group of people that they actually infiltrated the groups, right, the Shores groups and things like that, that were going to be trying. Well, there were two. Okay, there were two groups, two times, let's say. And the first time it was sort of just online trolling and things like that. Or actually, no, the first time it was for the referendum, if I'm not mistaken, and they were just handing out money. It was a classic, let's pay for the votes, all of that kind of thing. The second one, I remember, right, from the Moldovan guests who were speaking, right, at the conference, that they had a lot of people that they were recruiting, and they all had to be trained, right, as online trolls and different things like that. And the amount of money was very little. Okay, and by our standards, it wasn't like a huge amount. Madi, do you have anything to say about that? No.
Well, Moldova is not exactly a rich country. It's I think it's the poorest country in Europe.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if the Russians were offering this kind of money, that's the amount of money that they were placing the value of their involvement. It's not like the Russians are stingy. They are stingy, but if they want to achieve a specific objective, they will they actually will spend time to do some basic research in terms of how much it's actually going to cost to motivate the required number of people to help them out with a specific objective.
Yeah. I think overall, in the kind of operations that we're seeing, in terms of either subversion campaigns, right? Dietmar, we both look at what's going on with the pacifists and all of their group, the neutrality group, and everything that's happening there. We talked about the Moldovan. What I'm seeing is a lot of decentralization. Whereas before there were certain groups where they were pressed on, but now we're seeing a multiplication across all sorts of different platforms and all sorts of different vectors, even recruitment styles, right? One thing that we talked about, Maddie, I don't know whether, Dietmar, you've ever looked into this, but also all of the infiltration of the e-games, okay, that is going on, that is significant, recruitment through Telegram, and all of that kind of thing. So that's something that we're seeing, the outsourcing. Dietmar, you were talking about that, right? All of the outsourcing of these kind of things, all the PR firms. United 24 put together a great article on Limitless, for example. It's a PR firm, and that, and how influencers, right, are hired. But there's a difference there because we're used to sort of seeing the Russian trolls, all right, and that kind of thing. I'm looking at it and I'm seeing that through these, let's say, influencers, they're starting to present Russia in a much more positive light. Maybe they can because we're farther away from 2022, where there was a lot of information going on about what was happening in Ukraine, Bucha, right, Izium, and all of those other places, Mariupol. So now instead we're seeing a lot of young people. This is obviously geared towards the younger generations to recruit them and get them, roped in, right, to the Rusky Mir outlook, so on and so forth. We're seeing a lot of young people, and it's all positive. But that reminds me a lot of what the Chinese do, okay, as well, the way they present, right, the Chinese dream. Is this the same thing that you're seeing, Dietmar?
Yeah, I see. I mean, what I really like about your attempt to analyze these things and the way you do it is that you take a look at the people and the organizations and the reality of it, and not. I mean, what we see on the European level, EU level, and especially on our nation state level in the German-speaking world, if you speak about disinformation or foreign interference, it's merely a social media issue and anonymous trolls. But this is not true. We have real people. We have events in the physical world. We have rallies. We have panel discussions. We have a lot of presence of pro-Russian lobbyists, narratives, and also agents of influence in our mainstream media. And this is a taboo. Nobody speaks about it. Yeah. When you were in Vienna, I said, it's so lovely to have you here. I have competition now. Yeah. But this is not. And I always say I didn't say it out of arrogance, but because of frustration. Because it's really, if you speak to the people, also the good people who have a clear position, they say, "Yeah, but it's a social media. I'm not on social media. It's not about that at all." And I think what we when we take a look, even in the online world, it's also a people thing. Every time we have somebody who is not anonymous, who is a real person, like say an influencer, somebody who goes to Russia, a Westerner who promotes, there are a lot of nice products, and everything that is subtle remains undetected. Everything that is not clear, somebody with a sad on his head and saying Putin is the best and the West is in decay and the West are Satanists. If I don't speak like this, I remain undetected as a pro-Russian propagandist. By the way, also as a pro-Chinese propaganda. So we have all these anti-Western actors on social media, but they are real people. Sometimes they go even to mainstream TV. Sometimes they are intellectuals or even professors. They are at the universities. These people, these professors and these academics, which brings me to the next topic, next of our favorite topic. Sorry, I'm hopping so fast.
No, go.
But it belongs there because they usually are also social media influencers. This guy from Norway, who used to be very often, and he's still on RT, he has also a very successful YouTube channel. And only because he's 50 plus doesn't make him less an influencer, because we imagine influencers, they are like between 20 and 30 years old. Why? They can be older, they can be academics, and they can have a career outside of social media. So they're kind of hybrids. They have their YouTube channels, they have a lot of audience because it's 2025, soon 2026, but they also have their university, their lobbying, even sometimes they advise governments, and it makes them more believable on social media. And which brings me to the final point. The most dangerous people on social media are people that we don't consider social media people. They are just there. They use social media as a tool, which it is, but they are not considered like influencers or somehow, let's see, uneducated people. But it's the professor who also uses YouTube, and I think we should take a deep look what is going on there. But we don't. We don't. And
Yeah.
a few exceptions, we don't.
Well, the problem with academia, I can tell you, is that, and I'm sure it's the same in Austria. They have, right? They're covered. There's a mantle there, right? A protection that is part of their profession. So whether they're using it, all right, let's say they really believe in what they're saying or they're being paid to, it's extremely difficult to get at them. They're almost untouchable. They're the best ones. Okay. The ones where you do not realize that they are actually shilling for someone, okay, are the best ones because you don't even question it. Yeah, I mean, in Italy, we've got all sorts. And another thing that you brought up that was really important is that each of these influencers, if you're 50, 60 years old, all right, it's the target groups. So it doesn't matter, okay, your age. Your message will be tailored to that target group through no certain voices, okay? I can think of my dad, for example, who watches YouTube. The reason why my father watches YouTube is that he's 87 years old and he can no longer read, okay, because he really simply cannot read anymore. So he's using YouTube, and this is where these kind of, we have to really look at these vectors, all right, and the way that it's being used. He's using it sort of like, I used to be able to read it, now I have to listen to it, okay, and I have to see it. So even at 87, he's curious. He wants to know about the world. So if you're a 50 some odd, let's say influencer, right, Dietmar? My dad's going to be attracted by that anyway. Doesn't matter your age, right? If he's got someone in his peer group who is talking to him, even better, right? So these are the different things. These are all different aspects. It's really important that we look at. And in fact, it's most of the associations we're not paying attention to, all sorts of, civic organizations. And there's a lot of them here in Italy that I just love to, take a hammer to. That being said, anything before we close this up? Any last thoughts, Maddie, or anything like that? And we can maybe go into the big changes.
Well, just want to sort of comment. All of these professors and all of these influencers that think that they're being sneaky and nobody really pays attention to them became very active over the past couple of months simply because Witkoff keeps going to Russia and back and forth. So we have this process happening.
Yeah. 'Tis true. And that is a perfect segue into our next section, which, okay, is the change. Okay. I think the biggest thing that just hit us over the head was the change in the relationship between Europe, okay, and the United States, which was expressed, let's say, outright through the NSS, through the Trump administration's, right, national security paper. And this is the part, I think, that we sort of sat and we were expecting it in the sense that I know Mo-Madi and Dietmar, we probably talked over maybe during the summer, but even before that, even before Trump was elected, and we were already hypothesizing this could happen. Okay. We know through our own sources that we talked and said, that Europe was preparing for this eventuality. So it's not like they didn't know. It was something that was already apparent. The NSS does mark a real change, okay, in terms of America First. This is what we can see. We can see Michael Anton's imprint, okay, all over the NSS. It's really the isolationist bloc inside of the American foreign policy community that's made its mark there. Isolationist in a certain way, but America First taking care of its own interests, okay, and putting sort of the allies and quote unquote allies, all right, in their place, okay. The European Union, Europe, because I don't even think, I actually haven't checked this, maybe somebody could, how many times European Union is mentioned. I don't think so. I think, in the NSS, it's called Europe, and that's it. It's presented as a declining, okay, power. power in decline because of its cultural makeup, and also, right, a direct competitor. While Russia basically has a say in everything because it is the region's most powerful. That's the way it comes off, right, in the actual thing itself. It's got its own sphere of influence. This is another thing. And China is a near peer competitor, which has been elevated, okay, in this. Another thing that really bothered me while I was reading it was the governance styles, okay, or actually putting at the same level basically any form of government to our democratic systems, okay, where our leaders are elected by the people themselves. So it is an expression, right, of the will of the population. Instead, in these other areas, we know that that's not the case whatsoever. They also have, they're devoid, let's say, of their certain morals. He looks at these different countries, makes no distinction whatsoever in terms of philosophy, of culture, of moral underpinnings. It's all the same. It's all business. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong on anything. Another thing through the NSS, but this is also tips into, for example, since the beginning of Trump's presidency, what we've seen already, and then expressed once again, we have that he's hitting on Canada and on Greenland. Okay, this was another thing that happened right this year. Another thing as well that we tend to forget right in the beginning was the erosion of American soft power, which was extremely important. I remember that time, that moment when U.S. aid was closed down. And it was something that now we've forgotten. But this was America's imprint, okay, and foothold in so many different countries, doing something positive, having good relations, public diplomacy with local people all over. And that was essentially eradicated. Okay. And now we've also had in the last month 30 embassies are going to have their staff, okay, either closed, the whole embassy is going to close, or a severe reduction, okay, in people abroad. So it's sort of like, they're corralling and coming back. Well, I'm interested in what you guys think the effects, okay, of this has had on Europe. One, in my view, it's caused us, especially in Europe, finally, to begin thinking in terms of an independent foreign policy. Okay, it's very difficult because in Europe we have 27 different countries, and we can't get together on anything. I mean, the Commission, anytime it's got to decide something, we know that it's got to be done unanimously, so that it's the expression, right, a true expression of the Commission itself, and that there are no hard feelings. But we always have to deal with Orban. We've got to deal with Fico. We've got to deal now, okay, with other countries as well. Babiš, for example, in the Czech Republic. That's another thing, right, that happened. So this was important. That was one of the effects. And also with the Canadian relationship, that was huge. Carney's election in Canada after Trudeau, that called a snap election. We've got Mark Carney that steps in, and that's changed, completely. I'm Canadian as well, so it hits home. But Madi, can you maybe just comment on that, and maybe Dietmar, one of your something that you would like to comment on as well?
Well,
the
sure.
effects. We're talking about the effects of the NSS.
The NSS was predated by another thing, which was big in April, the so-called Liberation Day in the United States.
Yeah.
When Trump announced reciprocal tariffs against pretty much everyone.
He came out with those boards, remember?
Yeah.
Off. Yeah.
And initially everyone thought it was going to be just a tool that he's going to use to put pressure on allies and the trading partners to reach better deals. But it seems like they promised a ridiculous number of deals in a very short period of time, and they managed to achieve only a tiny fraction of it. Of course, the tariffs against hostile nations or potentially hostile nations such as China in the future make sense, especially considering the massive imbalance of the balance of trade between the U.S. and China. So to some extent, it makes sense introducing tariffs and making sure that the American consumer actually buys less of Chinese imports. But at the same time, introducing tariffs against the most reliable and the longest trade partner, such as Canada, was just absolutely ridiculous. Uh, it just made no sense, absolutely, because Canada has been supplying finished goods and raw materials to the United States at very reasonable prices for more than a century. And now they just want to torpedo that entire relationship
Yeah.
built on trust, built on hard work and very close economic cooperation. And to some extent, I wouldn't be afraid of using that word, even integration, because the Canadian economy was pretty heavily integrated into the US
Oh
economy.
yeah, no. I mean,
Yeah.
intertwined, but also we're also talking about people. Okay,
Yeah.
what I was saying before, people. I mean, I have family in the United States.
Yep.
Okay, they have us in Canada. I
Yep.
mean, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Canadians who have family in the States and vice versa.
Yep.
So we're not just talking about, two countries and two economic systems or two economic, partners. We're talking about a real intricate relationship. And look, it was the first time, I remember when it all blew up, it was the very first time that I saw Canadians pull out a Canadian flag. When I was growing up, we didn't brandish our flags. Okay. We were Canadian, but that's it. It wasn't like we had to show, all right, where we were from. And it was the first time that I had seen Canadians actually stand up and say, hold on a minute. Okay. Hold my beer. All right. That's the whole idea. And it really, really did spark not only, okay, in the population itself, but I would say also with Mark Carney that he began looking away from the United States, okay, in certain defense and also IT, okay, and let's say the development of connectivity, all right, that all of that industry there moving away from the United States, but also uh, starting projects with Denmark, with Norway, okay, with the European Union, by the way. So there's now, for example, there have been polling where, there are Canadians who are thinking, well, maybe a nice partnership with the EU that goes beyond what we already have would be a great idea, okay, as a protection. Also, because we're talking about an area that goes from, let's say, the all of the Canadian North all the way across, okay, Greenland, Iceland, and then hooking up with the Arctic on the other side, Norway and Finland, so on and so forth. So it was a huge deal. This is the effects of what the actual White House, the way its posture. So it was such an aggressive posture, really did put up a lot of backs and caused us in Canada, but also here in Europe, to look towards, okay, what are we doing? How are we going to protect ourselves? So you're a lot of defense spending, right? And different
Yeah.
things like that.
But at the same time, the Trump administration, and you know me, I politically, whenever I don't have any specific feelings about Trump per se. If he does something right, I'm ready to praise him. If he does something wrong, I'm ready to criticize him. But the first firing salvo of the so-called trade war against everyone was an utter failure and an absolute strategic blunder. First off, he pissed off all the allies. Second, he tried to put pressure on China, which made sense, but they were too quick about it and too rash because the Chinese pushed back very quickly with restricting the supply of rare earth elements.
Yeah.
As a result, the United States had to roll back pretty much all of their decisions, leaving only the tariffs that were introduced by prior administrations. So
Yeah.
what did that achieve? Nothing.
Nothing.
Yes, the United States is actively trying to decrease its dependence on China when it comes to strategic minerals. That's why they've been investing pretty hefty sums, not just through federal programs, but specifically through the Department of War, well, what they used to call the Department of Defense, But
Let's call it the Department of Defense. I don't think they changed. Have they changed the letterhead? Don't
they
think so.
have. I think they have. I'm not sure.
No, I have to check to see whether, because I think it has to be done through Congress. I'm not even sure.
Okay, I'll keep calling it the DoD then because I'm used to it.
That's
So
what I'm gonna call it.
yeah, the DoD is financing all of these projects, but as with everything, it will take time. Yes, they started a couple of years ago, but it doesn't mean it's going to be done in over a couple of years because the Chinese dominance in those resources is not just simple majority, but just their dominance in that in those spaces is pretty much a monopoly at this point.
Yeah.
So breaking that will take time.
Yeah.
And government funding. At the same time, the American Navy is also going through some weird strategic decisions which make no sense, at least to the people we speak to. And yeah.
What are you talking about, Madi? How about the new Trump boat, or
Yeah, the Trump class.
whatever it is, the Trump class?
Yeah.
Isn't that something that, they should be proud of or not?
All right. So the United States Navy is suffering from a severe shortage of hulls in the water. And not just any hulls, but hulls with VLS systems or vertical launch systems that can shoot missiles, either for strike land targets or air targets or anti-ship targets, and so on and so forth. Arleigh Burke is a pretty old class of destroyer, but the latest iteration, the Flight 4, is quite modular, so it serves the purpose. But they've been trying to replace the destroyer for quite a while. I think everyone remembers the futuristic-looking Zumwalt class that looks like a whole bunch of triangles. They were planning to build a bunch of them. They ended up building only 2 because they're insanely expensive, and they canceled the rest. So they moved on to another cheaper option called FREM. It's a joint development by 2 European companies. It's a Franco-Italian project by Naval Group and Fincantieri. And when Europe built that ship, it cost Europe about 750 million euros per ship. It's a frigate. It's a multi-role frigate. So the American Navy decided to purchase that blueprint, but adapt it to its own needs. So it became a Constellation class because it was heavily modified, but it was so heavily modified that it ended up costing over $1.5 billion or closer to $2 billion per ship. So what the Americans ended up doing, they laid down 2 hulls and they canceled the rest. So now they're going to have only 2 of those. So it repeats the story with the Zumwalt class, where they built 2 ships and cancel the rest. So with the Constellation, they're going to build 2 ships, cancel the rest. So they decided to replace that frigates with a Coast Guard cutter, which is an existing design. It will be modified for the United States Navy needs, but it will have no vertical launch systems because it's a Coast Guard vessel. Coast Guard doesn't need missiles because Coast Guard serves a different purpose.
Up in the Arctic, no. Well, no, you need icebreaker Coast Guards up there.
Yeah, so now, after all of these shenanigans where the United States Navy has been consistently proving that they cannot build ships properly like they used to during the Cold War, Trump comes out and says there will be a new Trump-class battleship in the 21st century. It's going to be over 35,000 tons in displacement. It's basically, I'm not going to go into numbers, it's massive.
Okay.
And in this day and age, it makes 0 sense to have such a massive ship because it's a big floating target. Also slow. Also very difficult to power a ship that size unless you put a nuclear reactor.
And it's not a reactor.
It's not nuclear. Yeah, at least they said this is going to be gas turbine powered, so I don't know how it's going to work properly. And on top of that, these days you don't want to be seen. It relates to air combat, surface combat, underwater combat, land combat, anywhere. So to reduce the chances of being detected, you want to be small. If you're a huge surface combatant, remaining undetected is very difficult.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not going to go into military stuff because when I'm a military analyst, I will go into economics. That one single battleship is going to cost roughly $14 to $15 billion to construct. One single aircraft carrier for the United States right now costs about the same, $15 billion. Such large ships require specialized naval dockyards, naval shipyards to actually build them. The only shipyards in the United States that are capable of building the Trump class, we'll call it Trump class because that's what they call it, are the same naval shipyards that are currently building United States aircraft carriers that are supposed to replace the Ford class, that is supposed to replace the aging Nimitz class. So if they plan to build the Trump class, it will come at a cost of the aircraft carriers. That strategically makes no sense. Unless they're planning to build new shipyards, which they should anyway.
They should
but it will take years to do that. You can't just get a shipyard over a course of a single year or even 2 years. It takes a very long time to develop and construct. But then again, going back to the cost, would you rather to have 10 ships that cost $1.5 billion each? So if one of them gets sunk, you don't lose that much. Or you
it doesn't take you 15 years to build.
Yeah, or you have one ship that costs you $15 billion that has fewer capabilities than those 10 ships combined. Both cost the same. So that's why
economically, because Moni's a smart guy. See, he just looks at it and he says, hey, it's the bottom line is, right?
Yeah.
Is this. Another, let's say another effect, and Dietmar, this is where I need you as well, is the whole idea of the NSS, as I stated before, where you're finding Trump is saying these other blocks are equal, right, to the United States, all right, Russia, China, right, all of these other different countries. I know, Dietmar, that you've done a lot of research into the whole neutrality, the whole multipolar, thing. Has this given all of those shills that unfortunately we listen to every once in a while or do research on, has it given them, let's say, a new life? Has it breathed life into that the mega movement? Can you comment on that? Because this is a huge thing.
I would like to go for 1 second. I would like to go back to 2016. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I will not speak about the foreign interference campaign by the Russian Federation, which was there, which is proven. We don't know the amount of effect it has, but it had an effect without a doubt in 2016. And in 2016, we saw Trump won. And what we also saw, a lot of discussion on the domestic level about the term called fake news. We all know this term. I guess in the English-speaking words, it's even more disputed now than in the German-speaking world, because they say fake news is something Trump said to journalists when he didn't like what he or she said. Yeah. So this was a domestic issue back then, more or less. Yeah. And I remember that everybody who in Austria and in Germany who did a lot with disinformation or with media literacy, all these educators, these people who think they know something about disinformation, they were all completely focused on Trump back then. Yeah, 2016 until his term ended, until Joe Biden came. And I thought it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't like it. I don't like what he says. I don't like his domestic policy. I'm not an expert on that, but I see there are a lot of places where it's obviously BS. Yeah? But I think it's not a European issue. It was not that of a big deal. And I thought we should focus on what Russia is doing. We should focus on the troll farms. We should focus on all the Russian propaganda, because Russia wants to destroy Europe. The United States back then, they didn't care a lot about Europe at all. There was one time I remember when I was very angry when Trump said something negative about the European Union, when he promoted Brexit, or when he said it's not a bad thing or something. I was furious because that was a big deal back then.
Yeah.
Now everything is different. So now if you are a disinformation guy or girl and you analyze this as well, or even if you focus on this, you're not so wrong anymore, because we have Elon Musk, we have all these collaboration with the far right in Europe, and you know what we also have? We have a far left that is fond
Yeah.
Trump's
Yeah.
policy regarding Ukraine. They are defending him, and they're defending Viktor Orban. They say, actually, these far right guys, they are not the actual issue. The actual issues are the liberals or the neoliberals or the Euro fascists. They even use that term. So not
Mm-hmm.
make not
Yeah.
only a right term. So this is what changed. So we see we are now in the crossfire. And the Russian foreign interference that is coming towards Europe, they can build on this. They can build on that. They have now a collaboration with the United States. And I think, I mean, not with the United States as a whole, but with some of the narratives we are seeing here. And what bothers me the most is exactly what you mentioned. This view that countries are just countries, that we have a big chessboard, everything is just a trade. And you know where it comes from? It comes from this real politics. This is not
Yeah.
something Trump invented. I hear it since decades, since I was
Oh, yeah.
from the left wingers. I hear it. Yeah, they have their interests here. The Soviets have their interests.
Yeah.
But it's a democracy, and the another one is a dictatorship. And even small countries like Austria or let's say Switzerland or even Liechtenstein has more in common.
Liechtenstein. I know.
Yeah, they have
Poor Liechtenstein.
the US, despite all the problems the US have, than Russia. But he doesn't view it that way. He views it as a power play, and it's a big chessboard of all the superpowers. And we didn't have it in the Cold War.
Yeah.
No matter how much cowboy policy, Ronald Reagan, whatever you want to call him, but he understood completely there is a difference between free nations and the others. Yeah?
Yeah.
And we had a clear it was everything was quite, and now it's a complete mess. And the Europeans, we don't have resilience at all, because over the decades we have a big problem. That why do we have this rise of the far right? Because also of the far left, they don't defend ourselves against.
No.
They don't care if there's a difference in Slovakia. People go on the streets against Fico. You know what they have? They have European flags, they have Ukrainian flags, they have NATO flags, and these people say, Fico, we don't like you because our place is in Europe, we are part of the West, this is important of us. In Austria, we have also rallies against the far right. You know who's rallying there? Communists, the peace movements.
Oh, yeah.
European flag was there. Critical solidarity, I always say. If you have a European flag, they pull you away. They don't world project. So they are not really defending us against the far right because they want to put us out of the West or because they bow to Putin. They are just, it's this class struggle and all this. So we don't have a big group of people like us who are defending the Western liberal democracy. And I think we are going to lose if we don't wake up.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Just today, I had sent someone a post that I'd seen from, let's say, someone who's observing this up very, very closely. There's an association in Italy, just to add to what you're saying, there's an association, or to prove what you're saying, there's an association in Italy called Emergency. Now, these are people that go out, doctors and medical workers going out into the world in areas where, hospitals need to be set up, or there has to be emergency care. And they put out a post. They did a whole campaign in Rome, putting signs, against the war. All right. And they had Lavrov in there. I sat there and I said, what twisted mind thought of putting Lavrov there? I was absolutely, it's got the little symbol. Absolutely incredible. Notice how none of this gets put in front of the Russian embassy or something that is actually, Russia stop the war. All right. It's always directed towards what you're saying, the liberal democracies, making us, the aggressors, and they, all right, are the actual victims. It's completely twisted. We know what the mechanism is. This is something that you do. It's one of the things that you would have to do, right? An information operation. And disinformation operation that you would be running. That said, and I agree with you totally, Dietmar, on what you said. Going into one thing, actually, we've seen a lot of different information operations. And what we've seen as, and this is the last point that we wanted to talk about, was this whole negotiation starting from the negotiations. Okay. I've called them the Potemkin negotiations because essentially that's what I feel they are. There's no base to them. There's nothing to them because we know that Russia will never, okay, will never cede anything. All right. They will only be happy unless they get Donbass and a whole bunch of other things. By the way, they started, okay, with these kind of demands in March of 2022. Let's remember Turkey. Let's remember the poisoning of Abramovich that was there with somebody else. And then we get to, let's say, Trump getting into the White House. One of the first things that we see is Hegseth, who goes to the Munich Security Conference, where he says, all right, that Russia, I made an actual note about it, that Ukraine should be giving into, okay, Russian demands. After which, we've got an interview that I put actually in one of the posts because I just wanted it there for a historical document, just in case we ever forget these things. And before I even go any further, remember the Zelensky, okay, Trump and J.D. Vance, okay, attacking Zelensky during the White House. We forget these things, but these are all little things that just give us a wide picture of exactly what, all right, the Trump administration's position is. After which, we have in March of 2025, the Witkoff-Carlson interview. I invite everyone to go and listen to it, okay, because it is extraordinary. It's all right there, okay? It's all there, out in the open. So we have all of these, let's say, so-called, all right, negotiations topped off, okay, once again in August. Notice whenever there's some sort of counteroffensive going on or something, okay, to lessen the Ukrainian position, we have Putin visiting Trump, okay, in Alaska, which was the most, I have to tell you, as a Cold War scholar, as someone who lived in Canada, went through all of this kind of thing, seeing Putin in Alaska killed me. Absolutely. It was the most embarrassing moment, I think, for the Americans who believe, right, in their, let's say, in what is good about their republic. Okay. But, all right, that was that. We also have all through this period, starting from the beginning, okay, of March 2022, actually 2025, there's a 3-track diplomacy going on. All right. Because you've got the Witkoff, okay, Kushner, all right, Kushner track. You've got the State Department with Rubio, and then you've got J.D. Vance, okay, and all of that isolationist wing, right, of that. So you've got all of these three things going together. We have, again, let's say from June, I think there was a 28-point plan, but that again was introduced, okay, in March of 2022, which, okay, we get to today with the 20-point plan. So basically, this is also something, okay, that I wanted to bring up. In the meantime, by the way, let's not forget that there was also another situation that was going on with Belarus, which I followed from religiously from June of 2020, okay, before the election was stolen, that happened in August of 2020, whereby we have, okay, a trade-off. You've got sanctions lifted off of Belarus, potash, but remember that also Bel Air is now, okay, Belavia can, let's say the flights have been restarted to go to the United States for the 123 hostages slash prisoners, okay, that were there. And also another thing too, that we forget, all of those EU emergency meetings. Okay, I don't know how many times I had to stay up to see, okay, let's see what the official statements are, right? Of EU leaders rushing off to Washington or or somewhere, either to the UK or to, okay, Berlin, or to Brussels, okay, or to Paris in order, all right, to talk about and hopefully, okay, to get let's see, to protect Ukraine, okay, in their negotiations. And if you want to comment on any of this negotiation BS?
I would like to say one thing about it. About the negotiations or about this so-called peace plan, yeah? Because we see the second peace plan now. The first one was even more ridiculous. I don't like this one either. And we see with this peace plan that President Zelensky and Ukraine is very much under pressure, but because they don't receive enough support to defend themselves. So this is a catastrophe, what is going on. And if you look into this peace plan, we could speak a long time about it's rewarding the aggressor. We could speak about this chapter with minority rights, which is of course giving dignifying the Russian narrative of the Russian language problem, which is not a problem, which is completely made up. At least 99% made up by Russian propaganda. But the problem that I see and that worries me the most, even if Ukraine is going to give up territories, and at the moment, it doesn't look like it's only about Donetsk and Luhansk, the so-called Donbass. It's also about parts of Kherson and still parts of Zaporizhia. Then we also need to speak about another big problem, and this is the security guarantees. And there is one point in the chapter of security guarantees where it's written that if Ukraine attacks Russia, then the security guarantees by the allies of Ukraine become obsolete. And that means that Russia needs nothing else than another one of their false flag operations.
Like last night. Like yesterday, right, Dietmar?
Exactly. And I wrote an article. I mentioned this scenario, but I had no clue that only a few days later, boom. 1999, we know what happened in the apartment buildings. And then we have another thing, which is not a false flag operation, but MH17. I want to go back for once to 2014. Minsk 1. The Russians, they never give in. They never went halfway. They never, ever, in their history of at least of the Russo-Ukrainian war, they never said, okay, we made mistakes as well, or okay, this was our guys. It was never like that. It was disinformation and propaganda nonstop. And I don't expect a change. Why do we suddenly expect a change? So there are a lot of points of special monitoring missions, but what did the OSCE achieve? There are even some OSCE inspectors, or how they are called, agents. I don't know the English term. In German, they are called inspectors, I think. They were even pro-Russians. They wrote books that are saying both sides, and then later it turned out they have. So I don't trust them, to be honest. And I don't trust that they see everything, that they understand that I'm not monitoring two countries that are equal. I'm monitoring a country, Russia, that is the most powerful propaganda machine. It's a constantly lying. I mean, Putin is a pathological liar. His whole regime is, the Soviet Union already was, they are in perfection with this activnia meropriatia, active measures, hybrid warfare, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever you want to call it.
They just need one thing. They need a little bit of plastic explosive. They blow up a building in Sochi, Moscow, or Leningrad Oblast, and then they will say, oh, it has been the Ukrainians, now the ceasefire is over, and now the war starts again. So there is zero guarantee in this peace agreement.
Oh, yeah, no, zero. Absolutely, I agree. And Madi, you want to finish off on this one? Anything to add?
Russia's strategic objectives in Ukraine have not changed since day one. So I don't know what people are to achieve in this process. The only thing they're doing is wasting taxpayer money on all of this travel, wasting time. And on top of that, while this process is ongoing, other things could not be done, such as negotiating future aid packages for Ukraine.
Exactly.
Or negotiating future additional sanctions against Russia. So the entire process, the Russians are the only one who is winning from all of that. So,
yeah, it's a huge shaping operation. So basically, it's directing, right, efforts, time, which are precious to us, okay, and especially to Ukraine, shaping the way that we need to respond to things instead of saying, hold on a minute, we're busy, we're doing this right now, okay? For those of you that didn't see what was happening last night, just to give you an idea that, it's all basically bunk, is that the Russians came up with, an operation last night saying that the Ukrainians had struck the Valdai, one of Putin's homes at the Valdai, and that there were 80 drones, missiles. I don't know exactly the exact wording for it. And they should have called the MOD because they didn't know anything about it. So they kind of screwed up. It's terrible to see that there were countries that, I guess they got the phone call, they have to show some sort of support, that they actually believed right in that. And the worst was that then Trump also, said, oh yeah, all right, I talked to Putin and he told me about it. It's absolutely horrible. That's terrible, so on and so forth. Which just goes to show you, puts a big, huge question mark any single time that, let's say, even if they do, in some form or another, the Americans come forward and say, okay, we'll give you these security guarantees. How can you trust anything that they say? How can you trust that, Trump is not going to get a phone call? But besides that, let's put that aside. These are just, I think, operations that they're doing just to divert, all of the attention and divert the resources that are necessary for us to take our own security here in Europe, much more seriously, and to get going a lot more, a lot faster.
Yep.
Anything that you wanted to say? No?
Ukraine already had security guarantees under the Budapest Memorandum of 1994. So
what?
What
exactly.
happened there?
What happened?
Nothing.
There?
Yeah. But on top of that, there were also security guarantees from the Russians. The Russians also signed the Mo-Madi Accords of 1991. They also signed the demarcation of borders with Ukraine in the 90s repeatedly. So they signed a lot of agreements with Ukraine that decided to just ignore.
Yeah, that they just have not.
So
well, they don't.
There could be a whole laundry list of the agreements that the Russians signed and never actually honored.
Yeah.
They only honor those agreements that only work for them up to a point, and when they feel like they can win more by breaking those agreements, they will do it. Because internationally, historically, there hasn't been a strong enforcement mechanism against the Russian Federation and the Soviet Union, so they actually have no incentive to actually abide by it. And it's also a cultural thing. I know many people don't like that, but it's also a cultural thing where it's considered to be a good thing if you screw over someone Western in Russia. So
yeah. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it up, guys. And Dietmar, I want to thank you, for coming and talking with us. This was a great way to end the year. Hopefully next year. Well, I haven't got much hope that it's going to be a better year. Let's just put it that way. But I think in great company, we can do a lot and stick together. Anything that you guys want to add before we close up?
No, thank you, Dietmar, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. May it be better than this year, and thanks for having me. Good to have you guys. Good not be alone anymore like I have been in 2000.
Well, we'll be back to see you, so don't worry. Just keep it away. Keep the car running. We'll be there.
Yeah.
All righty, everybody, and thanks everybody for tuning in. And Happy New Year to all of you. Who have followed us today. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.